The Ken and Barbie Killer. It's one of the most sensational and sinister cases in Canadian history to the outside world. They were the perfect power couple, Paul Berendo and Carla Homolka, aka Ken and Barbie. They were a well-respected couple, but behind their sparkling blue eyes lies no humanity in the slightest. Together, they were a match made in hell, far more terrifying and psychotic than imaginable. Hello guys, if you want to know the truth about the disturbing Ken and Barbie Killer case, then keep watching till the end. History. Paul Berendo was born in Ontario, Canada, in the district of Scarborough. He had a very difficult upbringing. His father Kenneth was very abusive to the family and even molested Paul's sister. During Paul's time at university, he developed dark sexual fantasies. Not only was he abusive and degrading toward his girlfriends, but he would force them to have sodomy with him, and he threatened to kill them if they ever speak out. Eventually, these women were granted restraining orders against Paul. Starting in May 1987, the suburb of Scarborough in Ontario was plagued by a series of horrific crimes. In the early hours of the morning on the 4th of May in 1987, a young woman getting off the bus was kidnapped and raped. Over the next week alone, there were 2 more similar assaults reported. The victims were all women between the ages of 15 and 21. All the victims reported they were threatened to not go to the place. The similarities in what the women had suffered from led authorities to believe it was done by the same man. After this was made public, the newspapers quickly dubbed the man as a Scarborough rapist. A couple of Paul's victims managed to fight him off, and Paul was subsequently questioned by the police, but due to the lack of evidence, he was not named as an official suspect. Just a few months later, he would meet the love of his life, also partner in crime, Carla Homolka. She was born in Port Credit, Ontario. She had 2 younger sisters, Lori and Tammy. Carla was a gifted, well-behaved student but fell into depression and regularly cut herself. She was an attention seeker who would do anything to attract the attention of others. Not only did she claim false suicide attempts, but later began taking on sadistic fantasies. When Carla was 17, she met 23-year-old Paul Berendo at a restaurant in October 1987. The minute they locked eyes, they were instantly attracted to each other, describing it as love at first sight. Paul would drive to spend time with her twice a week. Eventually, he would come to control her life. He controlled her daily activities, what she ate, how she dressed, and her beliefs. Carla would do anything to impress him. She thoroughly submitted herself to him and his dark sexual behaviors. But this wasn't enough for Paul, and he wanted her to improve. So he would write down his comments on what he called a self-improvement list. Despite being in a relationship with Carla, this didn't stop Paul from going on a crime spree. Crime spree. In March of 1988, the police recognized there was a rapist, so they started a task force to apprehend the infamous Scarborough rapist. There were heavy amounts of evidence and a composite schedule of the potential rapist, but the police failed to show this to the public and the case remained closed. Carla was in fact aware of Paul's crimes, and there's been allegations to suggest she was involved in some of them. One victim said when they were being attacked, Carla was seen to be recording the ordeal, but this was ignored by the police. In 1990, the police decided to release the composite sketch to the public. Friends and previous girlfriends of Paul were quick to contact the police, but unfortunately, this was not followed up. A few months later, in November, the police took blood, saliva, and hair samples from Paul Berendo as part of a citywide investigation. Luck was on Paul's side because these wouldn't be tested for another 2 years. Paul started to develop an obsession with Carla's 15-year-old sister Tammy. He stalked her, and in 1990, he came up with a plan to rape her. But what was even more shocking is that Carla assisted him in doing so, and she would make sure Tammy remained a virgin until then. Paul attempted to rape her after Carla dropped her sister's dinner with Valium, but Tammy woke up before Paul had a chance to. The second attempt happened in Homolka's family home just a couple of days before Christmas. On the 23rd of December 1990, while Carla's parents slept, they spiked Tammy's drink with sleeping pills, and once she was unconscious, Paul raped her while Carla held a chemical-soaked cloth to Tammy's face. To make matters worse, the couple filmed the entire act. Tammy began to vomit and stop breathing. They tried to revive her but failed, so they quickly cleaned the room to remove any evidence, dressed Tammy, and then carried her back to her room before calling the ambulance. Tammy's death was ruled accidental, despite having a large chemical burn on her face. After Tammy's death, Paul and Carla moved to Port de Houses. Here, they disgracefully reenacted themselves, role-playing sexual acts between Paul and Tammy. Carla played her sister and wore her clothing to make the fantasy more realistic, and this was also filmed. Carla invited her colleague to their home in June 1991. Her name remains unknown, as she was referred to as Jane Doe during the trial. Carla then handed her a drink which had been spiked. This caused her to lose consciousness. She then told Paul she had a surprise gift for him, and the two filmed themselves raping her. The victim woke up the next day not knowing she had been raped, but just that she felt very unwell. A few days later, on the 15th of June, 14-year-old Leslie Maffey asked Paul for a cigarette. Paul saw this as an opportunity and asked her to follow him to his car. Here, he blindfolded her, forced her inside the house, and told Carla of their new playmate. They filmed themselves raping her, but when Leslie's blindfold fell off during the act, they killed her to stop her from going to the police. She was then dismembered, and they disposed of her remains in Lake Gibson. Her body was discovered on the 29th of June 1991, the same day as Paul and Carla's wedding. In August 1991, Carla's colleague Jane Doe was invited over once again. What happened next was very similar to what happened to Tammy. During the rape, she stopped breathing, but luckily was revived. Carla actually called the emergency service and requested for an ambulance, but when she was revived, Carla called them back and the ambulance was recalled. On the 16th of April 1992, Paul and Carla kidnapped 15-year-old Kristen Fring, who was leaving school. Carla was the one to lure Kristen into the car. Kristen, however, was not blindfolded and was forced to drink large amounts of alcohol and to watch Leslie's rape tape. The couple raped her for 3 days, and once they were bored, they strangled her to death with an electrical cord. They tried to remove the evidence on her body by cleaning and cutting her hair. Investigation and punishment. The police connected Paul with the murder, so they interviewed him but somehow came to the conclusion that he was an unlikely suspect, despite his previous connections with the Scarborough rapes. In December 1992, Paul was hitting Carla with a flashlight, and this left her with multiple bruises all over her body and 2 badly beaten swollen black eyes. Regardless of her injuries, she returned to work on the 4th of January 1993, and when questioned about her bruises, she said it's from a traffic accident. Her colleagues didn't believe her and contacted her parents, who subsequently took her to the hospital. Carla then opened up to the doctors, claiming her husband Paul did it and filed charges against him, in which he was immediately arrested. The samples Paul had given 2 years earlier were finally tested on the 1st of February 1993. The Toronto Metro Police found Paul's DNA matches out of the Scarborough rapist. After that, everything unraveled, and soon Paul and Carla would find themselves facing the legal consequences of their heinous crimes. In February 1993, Carla sought immunity for information in the case, but this was denied. Instead, she was given 1 week to accept a 12-year sentence for manslaughter or face charges for all 3 murders. Carla accepted the plea deal and testified against Paul at his trial, which took place in 1995. On the 1st of September 1995, he was convicted of a number of offenses, which included 2 first-degree murders of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, along with 2 aggravated sexual assaults. Paul Bernardo was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 25 years. And as for Carla's plea deal, she had been offered before the content of the videotapes were made available for reviews. Some prosecutors said had they known what was in those tapes, they would have never proposed to her the plea deal. But the plea deal was necessary because in spring 1993, it was clear that the case against Paul depends on Carla's evidence. So guys, what do you think about today's video? I hope you liked the recap. If you want more recaps on different murder cases, then please do mention them in the comments box. This is it about today's video. Guys, do give this video a thumbs up. Also, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our next murder cases. Goodbye for today. Peace.